of SME at the Kenya Private Sector Alliance. Jimmy Kariuki is the chair of the Kenya Tourism Board, and Phyllis Wakiaga from the Kenya Association of Manufacturers. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, and thank you for making the time for us here on the program. Patricia, let me begin with you. We've seen that the MSME sector has been hardest hit, yet some continue to remain optimistic. Are they realistic in their optimism, and what, in your view, have been some of the anecdotes that you're hearing from various sectors in this industry?
Thank you so much. Yes, to be honest, the optimism is born of the fact as Kenyans, we do always tend to be very optimistic. We are very enterprising as a nation, and we always feel that as long as things are open and opportunities are there, we'll take them. One thing you'll notice in this survey is that there was a shift between when there were stronger restrictions, that was up until the July period, to when things opened up after July. And the difference in the opening up allowed all these businesses to sit down and say, how do we scrape together what we know best and continue to do it? So when you find a lot of the micro enterprises, what are the areas they're in? If you look at the people in the hospitality, they were able then with the reopening to sit down and say, okay, how do I continue to serve my customers? If you look at people who are in the retail industry, how do I start to reopen within the guidelines that are provided? So in terms of speaking, are they optimistic, and is it right for them to be optimistic? Yes, because they don't know anything else. And as Kenyans, we always say we don't know anything else. Our enterprising nature allows us to look at how do I do it, how do I get around it, and how do I continue? And so the other area that the research spoke to quite keenly was the fact that a lot of these micro enterprises suddenly recognize the opportunity that exists in digital. So how do I start to sell whatever I was selling, if not physically, but be able to put it on the social media platforms and use another microsector called border borders and everything else to make sure I enable delivery, etc. So when somebody asks me, are they right to remain optimism? I would say yes, because they don't know any other way. And that is our nature as Kenyans.
Indeed. And perhaps where we saw some sort of growth was in the manufacturing sector. Phyllis Wakiaga from the Kenya Association of Manufacturers with us now. Phyllis, we saw many going into the manufacture of PPEs. But beyond that, what other products have people ventured in when it comes to manufacturing over the last 9 months?
Thanks, Yvonne. The pandemic has definitely affected the manufacturing sector, like other sectors of the economy. And if you looked at the Q2 results for this year, we did see a contraction in the sector by about 3.9%. However, early on in the pandemic, manufacturers began to shift their focus from what they were focusing on, like profitability, expanding into new markets, to focus more on their cash flows and how they can keep their employees employed. They also looked at the different opportunities that were emerging in the market. And apart from PPEs, we did see a lot of growth also in either hygiene products within the market. So things like sanitizers and other hygiene products within the market also saw a growth in terms of the manufacturing sector. The sector also did try to ensure that they were serving the market also in health-related products. I think one of the things that has become quite clear during the pandemic is the need for us to be self-sufficient in some of these very critical sectors like the health sector. There was also the period where there was less imports into the country at the beginning of the pandemic, and the sector also filled in the gap to supply some of the key products during that time. So some of the sectors where we've seen growth during this are really the chemical and allied sector. The pharmaceutical sector has also seen some growth during this period of time. The textile and apparel sector, because of the issues around supplying of COVID-related textile products and PPEs. So it has been a challenging year for the sector. But what we have done, as Patricia said, we're optimistic as people of the country, and we also try to ensure that we maximize on the opportunities that exist. The SMEs within the sector have also been hard hit. You can see from the survey that was carried out by KEPSA that SMEs did struggle through this pandemic. So just trying to see what we can do to support them to remain afloat. Some of the other sectors that were hard affected were those that supply to the hotel industry and also to the education sector. Those were affected, but we've seen people also try to innovate within those sectors.
All right, and we'll come back because I want to just take a look at what happens in the future. But before we go to Jimmy for just a moment, Phyllis, I know this at the start, particularly with masks and a number of others, was that the rate at which the manufacturing was happening perhaps may not have been in tandem with the certification and standardization of quality. How is that now, with making sure that whatever products are being manufactured, because there's great demand, obviously, for them now, but to make sure that they meet, the right standards? Has the Kenya Bureau of Standards matched up to that so that even though we're saying we're manufacturing all of these things locally, but that they're of the right quality?
Yvonne, just to confirm that KEBS were very supportive. Actually, at the time we were getting approvals for a lot of the PPEs, the masks, and even the ventilators, they did do away with any costs for applying for certification and ensured that they speeded up the process. So that was quite useful. Now it's just to ensure that at the market level, there's compliance across all levels. I know that sometimes even the SMEs have struggled on issues like the face mask, but what we've tried to do is to certify the main material required to manufacture some of these face masks locally. So we did see a lot of support, especially from the Ministry of Industry, Kenya Bureau of Standards at the beginning, to really just get a lot of these approvals done within what would normally be a 2-month period to sometimes even 1 or 2 weeks for approvals.
Okay, all right. Jimmy, from the Kenya Tourism Board, 3 billion shillings was injected into the sector. Has it been received by, your members? And in what way has it been used to just mitigate the effects? Tourism was obviously one of the hardest hit sectors. Jimmy, can you hear me? Okay. All right. Jimmy, can you hear me? All right, we'll get back to him and ensure that that is done. Let me go back to you, Phyllis, for just a moment. There have been some legacy issues that have beset the manufacturing sector. Issues of licensing, in some cases, people talking about double licensing, the cost of power, and the cost of labor, with, in fact, many saying that the cost of labor in Kenya is higher. Many manufacturers have been moving to countries like Ethiopia, where that is more affordable. What's your view regarding that now that we've had 9 months where we've really had to look inward for the last 9 months?
Yvonne, you're right that we have had challenges in the past in terms of competitiveness and the cost of doing business locally. So the manufacturing sector has had a number of those challenges. As we've tried to navigate the COVID pandemic, we did do some work with KPMG. We released a resilience and sustainability report, sort of a toolkit that would guide the policy direction going forward in light of the historical challenges and also the current challenges around COVID. And one of the things we did talk about was the fact that we need to figure out how to nurture some of these nascent industries that had emerged because of COVID. We also did need to find a way to still address the issues on the cost of doing businesses and the competitiveness within the country. I agree with what came out of the KEPSA study, because that was similar when we did carry out the study, that some of the measures that were most useful were around VAT, pay as you earn, and corporate tax, because what they did is a lot of those measures released more money into the economy and improved the purchasing power of consumers. We, however, are urging, even as we move forward, that we approach a do no harm approach, so that even as we make new measures, we don't affect business. One of the things we have in mind is the minimum tax that is coming in from January 1st, where a 1% will be charged on the gross turnover of all businesses. Mm-hmm. And we're really urging government, for this and other measures that affect competitiveness and the cost of doing business, that we consider the impact COVID has had on business, and we become more cautious in doing and putting in place some of these measures, because they can have long-term consequences and affect the recovery of SMEs and businesses as we move forward. So minimum tax and other measures that affect competitiveness, whether it's at county level, the PVOC that has recently been introduced also by KEPSA and other measures really need to be relooked at, because we already had a struggle with the competitiveness and the cost of doing business even before COVID.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks. Please stay with me, Phyllis. Let's try Jimmy Kariuki one more time, the chair of the Kenya Tourism Board. Jimmy, if you can hear me, I'd asked initially about the 3 billion Kenya shillings that was injected into the tourism sector, one that we saw hardest hit with literally grounding of international travel and restriction of domestic travel as well. Have your members reported receiving this money? If so, how has it been used to sort of plug which holes, and has it been effective?
Yeah, thank you, Yvonne. Sorry for that glitch. The tourism sector, the impact from COVID has been breathtaking. Jobs have been lost, and many million more jobs are at stake from being lost as a result of the impact of the pandemic. The tourism sector, we employ about 2 million Kenyans, so that's directly in the sector, tourism sector, manufacturing, agriculture, insurance, construction, etc. And as we also support the vulnerable sector. In terms of the funds that were allocated by Treasury for the tourism sector, that is being managed by the Tourism Fund Corporation, and there's a process that's in place where interested members applied for the fund. I think the process is still in place. I can tell you, as the managing director of Sorogo Hotels, we haven't received any funds as yet, but we are aware that the process is on. Unfortunately, as an industry, we do need a much larger stimulus package than 3 billion, because now we're not even talking about recovery.
I'm sorry, we have to apologize for the quality of that signal. Let's sort that out with Jimmy and then try and see if we can get him back on there. But he was saying some important things about the numbers of jobs that are provided in the tourism sector, about how they were had to apply for that 3 billion shillings. He's also the MD of Sarova Hotel, saying they're yet to receive that. Let's sort that out, and then we will come back to him. Patricia, let me get to you with this regarding the private sector alliance, regarding the private sector in general and MSMEs. There was one thing here that was interesting to note. 21% of those businesses that were surveyed, Patricia, say they're not sure whether their organizations will ever fully recover. And so therefore, even with optimism, I guess, it can never be business as usual. What does the new normal look like for traders and businesses in the MSME sector?
Thank you, Yvonne. I think what you find has been the biggest challenge for these MSMEs is that because you're a smaller business, it means you have no buffers. Mm-hmm. So the bigger businesses were able to recover, and they say they will recover because as things opened up with their buffer, with their business continuity planning, they always had a little bit there that allowed them to reopen businesses. But for SMEs and micro SMEs, that does not exist. So the minute your business stops, your liquidity stops, everything stops. And because you cannot see how you're going to find that money to build your working capital, to start again, you say, I'm not going to open. So as KEPSA, one of the things that we recognize is that these businesses will stay dead if we cannot find a way for them to find cheap, affordable money that allows them just to reopen, get a little bit of working capital, and if need be, pay themselves and manage what they need to do. Which is why we created we in conjunction with MasterCard Foundation, launched the fund to provide the loans for a maximum of these 400 micro and small medium enterprises whose businesses have been affected. And this loan facility is interest-free and repairable in up to 6 months. So when you look at this recovery resilience plan from a liquidity point of view, it means even those who are saying that they cannot open, there is now a light at the end of the tunnel, because if they're able to borrow even that 100,000, they have a window of time, they don't pay interest on it with the reopening and the lower restrictions, then they're able to do a little bit of business and pay back, look at what else they can do, what other opportunities they have. That is what we are trying to do, and we felt would be one of the best ways to support them from that perspective. I don't know. I think that is one of the areas that we felt supporting the liquidity, because without business, again, you cannot go to any bank. You have no collateral. So trying to offer some of these things became a way to increase that number of businesses who feel they can reopen and they can restart.
All right, easy money, maybe patient money, I think might be what we want to call it. But beyond that, what happens now? How do these organizations rebuild themselves in a different way, perhaps making themselves more resilient? I think if COVID-19 has taught us anything, it's to prepare for eventualities such as this one. So what do MSMEs and small businesses that are watching the program today, what do they do differently? Starting today, starting next month, starting next year, when many of them anticipate full recovery, because we certainly cannot do things as we have done, for the past year, for the past couple of years. So maybe if you have some practical steps that, in your small business, even if you do get the patient money from MasterCard, like you say, there's also the credit guarantee scheme, whose implementation was supposed to be last month. We're still waiting for it. Beyond just getting some liquidity put in, what more can they do and do differently and do better, Patricia?
Okay, the first thing that a lot of the businesses is going to recognize is that they can't afford to do the business with the same scale of resources. So inevitably what you're going to find, there's going to be fewer people doing the same. How does that help them? So a lot of the businesses that are opening, if you have your little shop, whatever, you'll find that before you had a shopkeeper, you had somebody to assist you, you find that you tend now to use fewer people. If it's you yourself, and you tend to work on your own doing that. The second thing that we're finding is that a lot of people are offering now more contract services in terms of what you need to do. So in terms of, instead of looking for something that is a little bit more permanent, a lot more people now are flexible to say that I am happy to do something for just now. Pay me for the output and for what I can do. And then once I get paid for that, or we get the result of that, then I'm able to do that. The third area that you're going to find businesses are going to do is they're no longer going to be holding this thing called stock. So stock is no longer going to be something that you keep and you pay. So it's going to be delivery on demand, and which you find a lot of the technology is supporting, whereby now you find, if I was before holding a retail store, I'm now selling on Instagram. I mean, I have bought a ton of things now on Instagram, from kitchen utensils, which initially were being sold in a shop. And now what that allows you to do is, I don't need to pay a rent somewhere. I don't need to hold any inventory somewhere. I just have a relationship with somebody who has the stock that I need. And as the customers place the order, I call on that and sell it onwards. These were tools that were used by big business that are now being applied by small micro businesses in order to make sure they survive and just work with the minimal resources that they have. The other area is that you're going to become, a lot of these micro enterprises, although they were always very customer centric, are even more customer centric now, and tending to use a lot more social media and digital platforms to make sure they reach their customers. You'd be surprised how much, as Kenyans, we are adept in that particular area. And so any little micro enterprise that does not adopt that, unfortunately, is not going to survive. And one of my favorite sectors that I say I'm absolutely amazed at what has happened to it is the borders. There's no delivery, there's no system that would work today if it wasn't for the growth in this border and the formalization of all the borders and the Uberization, in quotes, of them to support a lot of the micro businesses from a delivery point of view. So these are some of the areas I think that overall microfinances will have to innovate in, will have to flex in order to survive and eke a living from whatever little business starts coming through.
Indeed. Thank you, Patricia Idao there. From KEPSA, let's take a break here with those practical lessons from Patricia on what small businesses need to do, where we're going, the silver linings. We'll definitely continue to have more of this conversation. I still have Phyllis Wakiaga with me. We'll get some more of her closing thoughts. And don't forget, we've got Patrick Igunza out in the CBD. We've got our Faisal Ahmed speaking to you, the business traders. We're coming back with that and more after this break.